Welcome to What's the Deal by Bluegrass Realtors, your go-to source for the latest housing trends, market insights, and industry updates from the heart of the Bluegrass region. Whether you're buying, selling, or just curious about the market, we're here to help keep you informed with all the info you need to make confident real estate decisions. Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of the What's the Deal podcast. This week we have David O'Neill, the Fayette County Property Value Administrator, here with us. Thanks for coming on, David.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so if you would just start off by giving us a bit of a background on how you got started.
Okay, well, I've worked most of my career in horse racing. Actually, I worked for the Jockey Club, which is the breed registrar for thoroughbred horses, and their subsidiary Equibase, the official database of horse racing. So we had a crew at every racetrack in North America, and, charted the race with binoculars and maintain a database, and then would sell that information to value-added resellers and handicappers, and so my background is mostly in data.
Right.
So when I got to the PVA office, one of the things I wasn't expecting is just how similar those two jobs were, because now I spend most of my time managing large amounts of data, very similar as before. So I'd always wanted to be in public service, be in elected office, but I'm not really a policy wonk. So I don't really have much desire to be a legislator. I'm more of an administrator, roll up your sleeves and get things done kind of person. So that got it down to about county clerk or PVA.
Narrows it down pretty quickly.
And at that time, so my name wasn't Don Blevins, so I couldn't be the county clerk. So that left PVA. But I think it worked out that it was just a perfect fit for me for my particular interests and my skill sets. It's been a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I caught on pretty quickly when I got here was there's things that we do as PVA here in Fayette County that are not really being done anywhere else in the country. So that's pretty neat. And I have some experience of doing industry first stuff as well. So I guess let's just start there. Like talk about that some of what's different with us versus others.
Well, first of all, you have to understand that there's a pretty big difference between what happens on any given day in a PVA office in a county of 5,000 people versus a county of 325,000 people. So they're just much different jobs. The smaller counties can pretty much maintain their tax roll in a series of Excel spreadsheets, and whereas we require a much more sophisticated database and set of software. So the jobs themselves are a lot different. So and also it's completely at the PVA's discretion on what type of website, or even if you offer a website. And so, us being a more urban environment, there are a lot more demands on the PVA, and as far as having access to the data and their expectations and that type of thing. So I guess coming at it, first of all, you just have to understand that there are two different environments. So there was, pressure to do more in terms of access and transparency and that type of thing. And then the other thing was coming out of my role at the Jockey Club, we had a trendy website, so to speak. It was really early on in that space, and I learned a lot from that standpoint, was able to bring a lot of that to the PVA office as well. So lots of opportunities, and also just the fact that the larger counties, Jefferson and Fayette in particular, have more demands on them.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different. Like, so for me, I've seen that in the association world too, starting 1,800 and then just kind of going up in size. It definitely changes as you get to more and more people to serve, for sure.
Right.
Speaking of serving, go ahead and just explain for people exactly what a PVA does and how your office serves the community. Okay,
well, our job is to determine what the fair market value of every piece of real estate in the county is. And we use the industry standard, the same industry standards that an appraiser would use, only we do mass assessing. So we do drive around the neighborhood and we do windshield inspections of property, but we don't go inside houses. So from that standpoint, we do with a mass assessment is different than what a full-blown appraisal is, but we still follow the same standards. Residential property uses the sales comp approach. Commercial property, we basically use the income approach. We don't do a lot of cost approach assessments, except for on new construction. We'll use cost until it's sold or occupied or change in use type of thing.
Yeah, and then so you talk about market value there. So that's one of the things is talk about the difference between market value and assessed value.
Well, in Kentucky, there's not one. In some jurisdictions, they'll only tax you on 50% of your fair market value. So in that case, your assessed value is half of what your market value is. But in Kentucky, we assess at 100% fair market value, so there's not a difference.
Oh, that's very good to know. That's
Yeah.
completely different than lots of places I work.
With the exception of some exemptions. So we've got the homestead exemption for folks who are over the age of 65.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have a disability exemption. If you're drawing disability, then you can probably qualify for the homestead exemption that way.
Yeah, that's good. And then go a little bit deeper then. So once that market value is determined, that's your primary role. But then how does that affect the homeowner from that point? Like with talking about the tax rate, for example.
Well, so that's kind of where our role in that ends. So
Right.
once we assess the value, and kind of where we are in the tax calendar right now is I've put those values out to the public. They're on the website. I sent mailed notices to property owners. Here's what your assessment has changed to this year, because we reassess a fourth of the county every year. So 25% of everybody will get a notice from me once every 4 years.
Once every 4.
And so then that kicks off the protest period where if you don't think that we got your assessment right, come in and conference with us and we'll review everything with you. And basically what we're looking for is what we were not able to ascertain by looking at the outside of the house. So are your kitchens dated? Are your bathrooms dated? Is there damage? Does your basement hold water? Things like that, things that we could not know without your input. That's the purpose of the protest period.
Got it. And then if a homeowner does want to enter that protest period, how does that work? Where do they go? What do they do?
Well, now since that one of the silver linings coming out of COVID was we've moved that process almost entirely online. We do still hear from a lot of people by phone calls. We don't get hardly any walk-in. It used to be that our office was packed with walk-in traffic during the protest period, but that doesn't happen at all anymore. People are welcome to come down if they want to. There's no reason to now. And so you go online, you fill out a form, it kicks off an email to an assessor who's actually assigned to place the value on your house, which is they also did your entire neighborhood. And then they'll follow up with you. We shoot for getting back to everybody within 24 hours, and we'll have an exchange of information. The property owners are a little bit better informed now than they used to be, because I'm actually providing them the comparable sales that we use to place their value. So you get those up front on your assessment notice. So that answers a lot of the questions. But basically what we're looking for is, how does your house compare to those comps? And but one of the misconceptions, and what I have to say every time I have these conversations, is comparable does not mean identical.
Yes.
Right? The purpose of a comp is to find a house that's enough like your house that we're able to identify the differences and come up with a monetary value for those differences. So just because a house is 300 square feet more than yours doesn't mean that it's not a comp. In fact, it could be a very, very, very good comp, but we're able to do a little regression analysis and figure out what the dollar amount is for 300 square feet and deduct that from the sale price. And then that's the theoretical value of your house. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the comps. And also, since the comps are sales, just a random house in your neighborhood, people want to go see on the website, see what I have that house assessed for, and then that becomes their comp. Right. And I'm using air quotes here for comp, but that's not what a comp is. A comp has to be a sale, right? Right. And so people will assume, well, the house sold, therefore it's in much better condition than mine. It's at least had a fresh paint job, et cetera, et cetera. And, I kind of agree with that. And so we build that into the model that, we try to, we assign a subjective condition or grade to the house when we're sitting in front of it looking at it. And then built into that, it will adjust the value based on what kind of condition we think it's in. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And probably a lot of music to realtors' ears, and a lot of that of far as where you said when you're determining the comps, realtors doing CMA. So you're looking for those minor differences and adjusting it based on that, rather than trying to do any kind of wholesale. What else has your office done in terms of new technology to improve access and transparency?
Well, the website's the big one. So, but I spent probably a full year, my first year and a half in office, looking around the country, attending industry conferences and seeing not only what the vendors were offering, but the best assessing jurisdictions, what what was what were best practices that I was seeing
Hmm.
that I thought could really bring some value, and I identified a couple. And so then spent a year researching it, then spent a year developing it, and then rolled out what at the time was a really fantastic website, and it's
Hmm.
still pretty good. It's just maybe not quite as cutting edge as it was 10 years ago.
It's hard to keep up with that, right? If
Right.
you know, staying bleeding edge can only last so long.
But if you go out and look at it, and I do challenge you to look on it, and I don't just mean my colleagues here in Kentucky, but just go around the country and do some googling of property assessor websites and go out there, and we've got comps out there. You can look up sales 5 or 6 different ways. We got a really rich map with various GIS layers that you can turn off and on. You can see floodplains, you can see school districts, you can see all kinds of different. You can see aerial photographs. We got one section where you can go this pictometry, which is high resolution aerial imagery, and you can go back to, I believe, most of the county now. You can go back to 2004
Oh
and
wow,
see imagery like once every 2 years, going back for is that almost 20 years,
that's
and see how a
outstanding.
property has changed. So there are a lot of fantastic, even though we haven't really changed. Fundamentally, we haven't changed the functions of the website in a while. There's still some pretty cool features out there.
That is fun stuff. Technology and data is fun, isn't it?
It is, yes.
It's always interesting to see what all you can do with it and start trying to get all these different data points into one usable place. And that's always the fun part. Let's shift a little bit, talk about like the community itself and real estate. You know, most of our listeners are realtors. So like what are some of the most undervalued or up and coming neighborhoods in the Fayette County area?
Well, it used to be. Well, let me say this. I don't think there's any such thing as an undesirable neighborhood anymore in Fayette
Hmm.
County, and that hasn't always been the case. So now we're seeing, in these. So in terms of doing my job, where I come in and I reassess a neighborhood, and I'm having to increase people's assessments substantially, the ones that really keep me up at night are some of these neighborhoods where 6 years ago you could go in and you could buy the average house in the neighborhood for 75 or $80,000, and now they're 200,000.
Right.
Those that's been a big shocking observation over the last several years, and it's continuing.
Hmm.
I've now covered the entire county in terms of having to make those really big reassessments since that phenomenon started,
Hmm.
um, between 5 and 10 years ago. This is the year where I finally got, okay, we've hit them all now, or we've reassessed them all.
Yeah, and actually, that's actually a good point to kind of circle back around to is you're talking about doing every 4 years you do an area. So what was the area that was reassessed this year?
This year was Southern Fayette County, so basically everything outside New Circle Road, south of Versailles, and south of 8th and Spoonsboro.
First town. Okay, got it. All right. Yeah, I kind of reminded me back to that point. We wanted to touch on that for everybody.
And there are a few neighborhoods that in that area that we didn't reassess because, okay, so it used to be that I have the county divided up in about 300 different PVA neighborhoods.
Hmm.
And PVA neighborhoods are a little bit different than subdivision boundaries, or a little bit different than neighborhood association boundaries. We create boundaries where we try to lump properties that are as much alike as possible, make it as homogeneous as possible. It's easier to assess that way.
Right, right.
So a lot of times they kind of somewhat line up, but not necessarily. So there's about 300 of those, and for the last many years, the quad, or the quadrennial plan, where we would come in and do a fourth of them, would just be a neighborhood here, there, all over the place. There was no rhyme or reason to it.
Hmm.
And so I'd worked for a long time to come up with a plan to redo the quad plan, and we ended up finally implementing that 4 years ago, where it's now geographic based.
Hmm.
So the area that I just described to you is outside New Circle Road on the south side of town. That's a quad.
Hmm.
Everything inside New Circle Road is one quad, and that's what we did in 24.
Right.
Everything on the north side of New Circle Road, north of Versailles, north of 8th and Spoonsboro, is the north side, and we do that in a separate year.
Hmm.
And then there's kind of an everything else year where we do condos, townhouses, duplexes, farms, rural properties, mobile homes.
Right. So, and that's just the whole county, just based on more property type.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So that's the new quad, and we've now this is the third year of that new quad plan.
Hmm.
And so when we were making that transition, there was no way that we could just all of a sudden one year, okay, now we're on the new quad, because some of those neighborhoods we had just reassessed last year. So we
Right.
had to come back and get them again. So there was still a little bit of that. So there's probably 8 to 10 neighborhoods in that southern section I described to you that did not get reassessed this year because they were either reassessed in 22 or 23.
Gotcha. So they would be the next time this comes around, which will
Correct.
be 4 years from now. So 29. Am I doing my math right?
You're right.
Yep. So, and then which one of those is going to be, is the 26 the first time of doing the everybody else?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I want to make sure I had that correct for you. All right. What about so if anybody wants to challenge their assessment, what are some tips you have for them besides like the actual process itself? Like what should they come prepared with?
Okay. Well, first of all, you do not have to have been reassessed to protest your assessment.
That's good.
So it's open to everybody. Every property owner every year can go through the protest process if they choose to. You can go online, go to FayettePVA.com, and if you haven't been on there in a while, you'll probably get a pop-up box that encourages you to watch my series of videos on how to be effective in your protests, explaining what a comp is, how to use the website, explaining the assessment notice, and then you'll find a link to the form to fill out, and it's very straightforward. It's your name, your contact information, asking you to verify a few of the essential characteristics like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and then asking you to declare a value. So
Right.
you see what my value is. Now you tell me what you think the value should be, and then give me some explanation of why.
That makes sense. So yeah, FayettePVA.com. Did I get that right?
So what I encourage people to do is look at the comps that our software has selected for your property. Typically, comp number one is the one that the computer thinks is most like your property, and by most like, I mean it has to make the fewest adjustments to make for differences like square footage and number of bathrooms. So
Right.
the fewer adjustments that have to be made, the better the comp is typically. And so then, help us figure out, how your house differs from the comps. Now, one thing that I did this year in the videos that I was a little bit reluctant to do, but I still thought it was a good tip, is go to one of the real estate industry websites, like a Zillow, for example, look up the comp, where you will more than likely find interior photographs.
Right.
So you can see what the kitchen looks like and what a bathroom looks like. And then you tell me how do you do your kitchens and bathrooms compared to those kitchen and bathrooms. So.
And that's really good because going back to what you're saying, like you guys are doing windshield inspections, so you don't know what these people's kitchens or bathrooms look like, and that's a good chunk of the value of a property.
No clue, except for we do read MLSs when the house sells, so we will try to data mine as much as we can at the time the house sells.
Right.
But beyond that, unless they take out a building permit to do a remodel, and even then, they're not going to indicate on the building permit whether they're doing marble or granite. We still don't really know.
Right, exactly. So, how about let's go a little bit deeper in that. Like, what other role does the real estate market play in your assessments beyond like the sales and the MLS access?
Well, probably the biggest one is people use their real estate agent for advice, a sounding board. They'll reach out to them when they get their reassessments and say, "Does this make sense to you?" They'll ask advice. At the time, when somebody buys a house, maybe they're the first time homeowners and they don't have any idea, they've never heard of a PVA. They have no idea what to expect now. So, so that's a big one, is just being an advisor to a property owner, especially when they're new to home ownership. And so I hope that real estate agents, and I think they do for the most part, but I hope they will take the time to really understand the property tax model. And
yeah, absolutely. And I remember when I was a first time homeowner, like the property taxes and insurance ends up being a little obscured because it's just kind of rolled into your mortgage. So you just get this escrow analysis once a year.
Right.
And you're like, what in the world is this? So I remember when I was a first time homeowner, that's exactly what I did, is I reached out to my realtor and I'm like, what in the world is this? Help me understand it. And they did. So
just to make sure that your buyer understands that their purchase price is almost certain to become their new assessment. So especially now when prices are going up, and at any given time, your property is 50-75% under 75% of the county is under assessed when we only do a fourth of the county once every 4 years, right? So they look on the website and see I've got it assessed for 200,000, but they're buying it for 300,000. So they may be expecting a different tax bill than what they actually get. So just make sure they know that.
Make sure they know it up front. Absolutely. So what are some of the challenges your office faces, especially with like growth in the region?
I think that the typical homeowner knows if the house next door sold or the house across the street might have some idea of what it sells for. But I don't think that the average person just has walking around knowledge of what's going on in the real estate market.
Hmm.
So when they get a notice from me and I've raised their assessment $50,000, that's shocking to them
Yes.
because they don't understand that, and that's why that not just the comps that I put on the assessment notice, but I also put a sales map on there where you can see the 36 most recent sales in your neighborhood because people just don't have that knowledge.
That's really good. I like that. The 36 most recent sales. Cause yeah, we've hit 3 years essentially at this point of actually, no, I'm sorry, 6 years of median sale price increases. Like it hasn't really gone down at all for 6 years now. So a lot of people don't realize that.
There has not been a decline uh, in any month, a year over year decline in median sale price in the last 5 years, except for one. February of 24, for
Mhm.
some reason, was lower than February of 23. But other than that, there's not been a single month in 5 years with median sale price decline
Yeah.
in Fayette County.
Yeah, that's exactly in Fayette County. Like, there's one example that I've been using in a presentation lately. It's two houses that sold for $200,000, 700 foot apart as the crow flies, in the Liberty Heights neighborhood. One was $200,000 in 2020. One was $200,000 in 2024. And the 2024 sale has one less bedroom, one less bathroom, 30% less square footage, 30% less acreage, no garage, no patio, and no backyard. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't realize exactly how bad that has shifted, especially the under median sale price market.
Now, if you take that on back to 2014,
Yes,
that price would have been $90,000.
absolutely. Yeah. And just people a lot of times don't realize exactly how much prices have gone up. Um, so, and maybe except for try to stay on top of the real estate market, if you could give one piece of advice to every homeowner or potential buyer, what would it be?
Oh gosh, that's a good question.
It's a tough one.
That's a tough question. So, I do encourage people to have a better understanding of the process, and not just in terms of the protests and whatnot. And this also
Hmm.
gets back to your question about some misconceptions or whatever. That the role that I play in coming up with what the fair market value of your house is completely different than the process that the taxing districts come up with for setting tax rates,
Hmm.
right? And we're not involved with each other, so they don't influence my work in any way. They don't. They're not involved in what I do. I'm not involved in what they do. And when I say they, let's just take Fayette County Schools, for example, or LFUCG,
Hmm.
the government. So I go through the exact same process every year. The tax calendar is exactly the same every year. So at some point at the end of the protest process, I will put together a tax roll and then submit it to the State Department of Revenue, and they will make sure that all the numbers jive and that I did my math correctly, and then they will certify my tax roll,
Hmm.
and then the schools get a copy of it, and LFUCG gets a copy of it, and the state gets a copy of it, and then they all set their tax rates accordingly.
Hmm.
And sometimes they raise the rates, sometimes they don't. We have a thing in Kentucky called House Bill 44, and this gets pretty far into the weeds, but basically House Bill 44 says that any of these taxing districts can get a 4% increase in property tax revenues without basically having to do anything.
Hmm.
Their rates will kind of self adjust. If they want more than a 4% increase, then it's subject to a petition. And if they get enough signatures on the petition, then it's subject to a public vote. So I would like for people to kind of understand those two different roles. So
Right.
um, have your radar turned on during that time of year in July and August when the tax rates are being set,
Hmm.
and pay attention to what's going on. And there was a 2 year period in there, 22 and 23, where in 22 the schools decided to take a bigger increase in just the 4%. And so what ended up happening, different than it ever happened before, was there was a second supplemental tax bill that was issued
Gotcha.
because it was decided to not delay the collection of the taxes until after the petition process was expired, and not include the theoretical increase on the first tax bill, but wait until It's too late for the petition to pass. It's too late for it to go to the vote. Okay, now we'll issue a second tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up wreaking all kinds of havoc. Mortgage companies and had no idea what to do with escrow. They got the second property tax bill, and they're like, "Oh," and it was much lower, right? Because it was just
A difference.
it was like the second bill might have been $19, right?
Right.
So the mortgage company gets this tax bill for $19. Oh, I guess their assessment went down. This is the new, so we'll refund all.
Oh no.
So they've refunded people's escrow. They changed people's mortgage payment to reflect this new value, for property taxes. And so now fast forward a year and a half later, and now the real tax bills have come out. And so now there's a shortfall in the escrow account,
Mhm.
and they're having to double people's mortgage payment to play catch up.
Wow.
And in some cases, people can't pay double their mortgage payment.
No kidding.
So this has really damaged people. So I'm getting out there and talking about that there has to be a better way. We cannot do this second supplemental tax bill again.
Yeah, 100%. And then like on your Facebook page, for example, I've seen comments of people like, "Oh, I've been done twice in a row or 2 years in a row," and I bet a lot of it's just confusion from that it caused.
Well, and the other confusion is they're not making a distinction between whether I raise their assessment or whether the schools raise the tax rate. It's an increase is an increase, and they just lump us together in one big conglomerate of increasers.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
Oh no, we feel that too because like if you're a primary member with us, we bill the local, the state, and the national, and we haven't increased our local dues in 15 years, but state and national keep increasing it, so people think it's just us increasing it
Right.
because we get to collect all of it. So I definitely get the getting lumped in with people. Any other misconceptions while we're on that topic?
Well, those are the big ones. The other
Yeah.
one is that we'll hear about, I guess they're just trying to make a budget, or you're raising my assessments because the city wants new snow plows and that type of thing, and they're just not. We're not, we're not the dog here. We're the tail.
Right.
So all we do is assess fair cash value and play no budgetary role in any of that. There's no incentive whatsoever for me to increase
Mm-hmm.
your assessment. My office budget isn't based on assessments. There's no reason for me to. All I'm trying to hit is fair cash value.
Exactly.
And what happens downstream of that in terms of budgets and tax rates and all of that is completely out of my control.
Yeah, and every conversation I've had with you, like your focus is that transparency and that customer service and that making sure that the citizens understand their value. And it's not about making money.
It's
Like we have
definitely not.
never had that conversation.
And so getting back to the point where we have no idea about the inside condition of the house, I really believe, and I think and it's part of this misconception that there's maybe some cynicism about government that they think that, well, if I go through the protest, it won't matter. They've already decided how much money they need to raise or that type of thing. And that's just not in any way accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly believe that the assessment process, it has to be collaborative between me and the property owner, because I know what the sales are. You know what the condition of the house is.
Right.
And you have to have those two things to place an accurate assessment.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, again, me and you are similar on, where like you're basically essentially begging people to get involved in this process and be collaborative with it. And it's the same for us. Like we want our members involved. Like we all have to work together on any of these things we're working on.
Another misconception is that I'm part of LFUCG,
Mhm.
but I'm an independent state agency, not a city agency. So,
Got it. That's a good thing too.
and so the work that I do is supervised by the State Department of Revenue. So they come in a few times a year and look at different statistics.
Mhm.
They look at sales, make sure that my assessments, match up to sales in some way.
Yeah.
They have to be. It's called a ratio, the difference between my assessment and what a property sells for.
Mhm.
And I'm required to be on average 90%.
Oh, wow.
And
So you have your own scorecard you have to stick to
for
as
sure.
well. Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
So there's also, that misconception is, you see what's happening in the economy and interest rates have gone up. So you have the discretion to not raise my assessments. And the truth is, no, I don't really have
Right.
that kind of discretion.
Yeah, and that's held by, it's a state law, legislature, or
State statute. Yeah.
State statute,
Just
yeah.
about everything governing what I do is in KRS 132.
KRS 132. Got it. All right, so just kind of starting to wrap up here. So, any upcoming deadlines, important dates property owners should keep in mind?
Yeah, so we are in the protest period right now.
Mhm.
We're actually not in the part of it that's laid out by statute, because every single year I shoot for April 15th for assessment notices to be in the mailbox and the new values to be on the website. So please keep that date in mind. Tell your clients that April 15th is the day. So you don't even have to wait to get an assessment notice in the mail. Go to FayettePVA.com, create an account. Should already have an account. Look up your house, look at what the value is for that year, and see if it's changed or not. So the official protest period is the first Monday in May, 13 consecutive days, including Saturdays. But we do it from April 15th forward. So we're giving you an entire month to do the protest. So it's the deadline will be Monday, May the 19th. So it's always kind of that third week in May. The deadline for talking to me is end of business on the Monday. And then if you still want to file a formal appeal coming out of that, if you're not able to resolve it with us, you want to file a formal appeal, the deadline is the next day to file an appeal with the county clerk's office. So that would be Tuesday, May the 20th.
Gotcha. But I mean, really, with that Tuesday, May the 20th, people should probably start earlier if they can.
Please do not wait. Okay. So the May the 20th, if you want to do that, you have to have talked with me first.
Right.
And the deadline to do that is Monday, May the 19th. But don't wait for that day either. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and get it done early.
Yeah. Let's get the conversation started at the very least.
Because what's going to happen is the commercial guys, they deliberately wait until the last minute because they think they've got me up against the wall that that I'm going to have to hurry up and settle with them because I don't have time to deal with it, and they're just very much mistaken.
Well, that's good to know.
But it is kind of a hectic time on that Friday and Monday.
Yeah, I can imagine for sure. Okay. Besides FayettePVA.com, how else can people reach out to your office if they have questions or need help?
246-2722 is our phone number. The website is best. You can find individual people and departments and get the individual email addresses. You can email me if you want to, david.o'neill, ONEILL @ky.gov.
Pretty simple.
Yeah. So those are the big ones. We've got a pretty active Facebook page, facebook.com/FayettePVA. Also have started putting some good video content on our YouTube platform. It's also youtube.com/FayettePVA. So lots of different ways to find us.
And then, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of our conversations have been based on an article you wrote recently. There was an easy way to get to that too, right?
Yeah, every July or August, Smiley Pete Publications, which is Chevy Chaser, Southsider, and Business Lexington, will ask me to kind of sum up what's going on in the in the real estate market. And so last year, I took a little bit different approach where I really got into the discussion of comps and the protest process and all of that. And that turned out to be a pretty well received article. And it's linked to in various places, including the Facebook page and the website. So
what we'll do to make it easy then is we'll just make sure we include it in the show notes on this for us. Yeah. So just thanks for coming in, David. We really appreciate your time here.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for understand I'm one of your early visitors. So appreciate you.
Episode 2. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we appreciate you coming in and look forward to keep developing this relationship. And I know I probably speak for a lot of the realtors when I say thank you for what you do. You do an outstanding job, and I hear nothing but glowing praise for your access to the website and stuff like that.
Well, I appreciate that, and also want to remind your clients that my very first day in office. Fayette PVA office, I came over here and met with Elaine Hanges. Day one.
Yeah. Everybody loves Elaine. I know I love Elaine. All right. I think our next month we're going to have Dr. Clark on from the University of Kentucky to talk about land, lumber, labor, and what's the third? Lending. And talk about the 4 L's and get that information in here and just continue to bring you the information you need on the real estate market. That wraps up this episode of What's the Deal? We'll see you next time for more tips and updates from your trusted real estate source. Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an update, and catch us on social media on all the major platforms. If you have any real estate questions, feel free to reach out, and thanks for listening.